mathematicians. Today we are going to compare and order integers. So go ahead and get your notes ready. Put that as your title and don't forget to add today's date. So when you think about integers, you should think about a number line. 0 splits your positive and negatives in half, which I didn't really put that right in the middle, but that's okay. Where your positives are to the right and your negatives are to the left. What order is your number line in? What order is a number line in? Well, if you're struggling with that, don't think about the negatives right now, but think about this. What order is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 in? Yeah, it's in order from least to greatest. Every number line is in order from least to greatest. So whenever you have to put numbers in order, if you think about your number line, that can help you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some hints or some things that we can think about as we think about negatives. Okay, so negatives are the opposite of positives, and they work the opposite. Okay, so for example, if we have 1, 2, 3, right? That's in order from, this is in order from least to greatest. But if I put negatives on there, -1, -2, -3, right here, right? -1, well, that's greater to, and then -3 is least. So this one is in order from greatest to least. It's the opposite. So negatives work the opposite of positives. Another thing that we can think about is that the more negative a number is, so the more negative a number is, the smaller it is. Okay, so if we have -11 and -9, right? -11 is more negative. Let's do that. So it's smaller than -9. Let's go ahead and put a -11 here. So -11 is more negative, so it is smaller than -9. Okay. Another thing that can help us is the closer a negative number is to 0, or the closer a number is to being positive, the bigger it is. So the closer a negative number is to 0, or being positive, it's just two different ways to think about it. The bigger it is. I'm trying to fit this. Okay, so like if we think about -3 and negative, I don't know, 10. Okay, so -3 is closer to 0, or being positive, so it is bigger than -10. Now, you think about all those rules, right? All those things that happen with negatives. So we're talking about negatives, right? But don't forget that a positive and 0 are always bigger than a negative. Always. So a positive or 0 is always bigger than a negative number. Okay? All right, I'm going to try to turn this page painlessly as possible and not mess up the picture too bad. All right, so let's think about some examples, okay? So let's just start with comparing. All right, we're going to compare first. Okay. Now remember, when you compare, you can do less than, you can compare with greater than, or you can compare with equal to. All right, and I'm just gonna, this is less than, this one is greater than, because I know sometimes kids, they forget. I know sometimes these symbols are hard, so we'll just label those like that. So this one's less than, this one's greater than. Okay, so let's compare some integers. So let's do -3 compared to 0. -3 compared to 0. Remember, your number line is in order from least to greatest, right? So -3 is on the left and 0 is on the right. So that means -3 is smaller than 0. Or -3 has more negatives than 0, so that means it's smaller. It's more negative, so it's smaller. And 0 is 0, so 0 is bigger. Okay, all right, let's do another one. Let's do two negatives. Let's do -6 and -10. Okay? So the closer a number is to 0, the bigger it is. Or the more negative it is, the smaller it is. So you can think about it either way. So -6 is closer to 0, or it's closer to being positive, so that means it's bigger. Or you can think, okay, well, -10, that has more negatives, so it's smaller. Either way, you're going to get that -6 is greater than -10. All right, let's do 3 and -3. 3 and -3. So 3 is what compared to -3? Yeah, 3 is greater than -3. A positive number is always bigger than a negative number. Now, some kids want to say these are equal. Well, they're not equal. They're opposites of each other. Okay, they're opposites of each other, but they're not equal. A positive number is always bigger than a negative number. All right? Okay, now let's do some comparing. Let's do some ordering. Okay? All right, let's look at these temperatures. We've got positives and we've got negatives. Okay? So our temperatures are 4, 9, -8, -6, and -1. All right, and let's put those in order from, let's do least to greatest. All right, so let's put them in order from least to greatest. So which numbers are smaller, positive numbers or negative numbers? Yep, negative numbers. So we're going to look at these negative numbers first. And we're not even going to pay attention to those. We're going to put these in order from least to greatest. So think about your number line. -8 has the most negatives, then -6, and then -1. Negative 1 is closest to 0, so it's going to be the biggest. Then negative 6 is the next closest. And then negative 8, so that means negative 8 is the smallest. So negative 8 is the smallest, then negative 6, then negative 1. Now we'll look at our positive numbers. So we're going to look at the 4 and the 9. And remember, we're putting it in order from least to greatest. So which one is the least positive, 4 or 9? Yeah, 4. And then 9. So now positives work the same way they've always worked. So don't get that confused, okay? All right, so a strategy that you can check, so you can check your order, is you know your number line is in order from least to greatest. So that means you should be able to go from the negative 8 to the 9, and you should be able to go straight there without going back and forth. Because if you're going back and forth, you know it's not in order. Okay, so let's try it. So negative 8, then we go to negative 6, negative 1, 4, and 9. We go straight there. Okay, let me give you for example if it's not in order. So let's use this, right? So we started at 4, and then 9, and then we go back to negative 8, negative 6, negative 1. No, that's not in order. You don't go like this when you're in order, right? You don't go choo, 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 choo. No, you have to go straight from one, straight to the other. So that's another way you can check to make sure that your numbers are in order. All right? All right, let's look at these game show. All right, so we've got Jennifer, Ryan, and Maria, and they each have a score that is below 0, okay? So we have a negative 200, a negative $1,200, and a negative $1,400, okay? So let's put scores, and let's write those scores down. So we've got negative 200, negative 1,200, and negative 1,400. All right, and let's put those in order from, let's do least to greatest again. Least to greatest. Now, we don't have a number line that goes to negative 1,400, right? So let's think about some of the other ways that we can tell which one is the smallest or which one's the biggest, right? So they're all negative, right? So the more negative a number is, the smaller it is. So which one of these has the most negatives? It's going to be the smallest. 200 negatives, 1,200 negatives, or 1,400 negatives? Which one is the most negative or has the most negatives? Yeah, 1,400. So 1,400 negatives is the smallest. Okay, poor Maria. She's got to get more questions right worth more money in order to get out of her negatives, right? Okay, now we're just looking at these two. So negative 1,200, is that more negative or negative 200? Yeah, negative 1,200 is more negative. And then negative 200 has the least number of negatives, so it is the biggest. Okay? All right, let's just practice a few more. We did 2 least to greatest, so let's put these in order from greatest to least. Okay, let's do negative 6, 2, negative 10, 8, and negative 3. So we're doing greatest to least, and you have positives and negatives mixed in. So you need to focus on the numbers that are greater first. So which ones are greater first? Positives or negatives? Positives are greater than negatives. So we're going to focus on the 2 and the 8, and we're going to put those in order from greatest to least first. Okay? So the 8 would be bigger than the 2. All right, now we're going to focus on the negatives. So we have the negative 6, the negative 10, and the negative 3. And we want to put those in order from greatest to least. So the greatest one is going to be the one that's closest to 0 or closest to being positive. Okay, or the one that has the least negatives. Okay, that's going to be negative 3. And then negative 6 or negative 10. Negative 6 will be next because it has the next least, and then negative 10 has the most negative, so that means it is the smallest. Okay? All right, so let's take a look. Greatest number is 8, then 2, then negative 3, negative 6, negative 10. We went in a straight line. We didn't go back and forth, so that means our numbers are in order correctly. Okay? All right, I want to show you a mistake that is made often. Okay? So write mistake real big so we know that this is a mistake that kids make. All right? Most kids can get the 8 and the 2 with no problem. And then they put the negatives next, but this is the mistake they make. And they make it because they're thinking 10 is bigger than 6 than 3, right? Because they're thinking about it like positives. But remember, it has to be the opposite for negatives, all right? So, yeah, if these were all positive, these would be in order from greatest to least. But they're not positive, they're negative, right? And so you have to flip it. You have to flip the numbers. And then look right here. Let's look at our number line and see, right? We have 8, 2, negative 10, and then we go back to the right, negative 6, negative 3. So we know we don't have it in the right order, okay? So let's put a little box around this. Let's put an X over it, all right, and say that that is incorrect, okay? All right, now, just a little side note. When we have rational numbers, now, yes, all of these are rational, but when we have rational numbers, that means they have with fractions and decimals, right? We order it the same way. Okay? So I'm just going to write these in order already. So 1.7, 2 and 1/10, 3, 3 and 5/10, and 3 and 9/10, right? So that's if they're all positive. That would be in order from least to greatest, right? This is least to greatest. If I put negatives on these numbers, our order has to become the opposite. They're not in order from least to greatest anymore. They're in order from greatest to least. Oops, look at my T. Greatest to least. As it works, right? The opposite. Okay, think about it. This is the greatest because this one will be closer to 0, right? We're looking at our number line, right? If that's negative, that negative 1.7 would be about right here. That's going to be closer than the negative 2.1 and closer than the negative 3, right? Okay, so that's just a side note. We are going to be getting into ordering rational numbers as well. Okay, so that is comparing and ordering integers. Remember to think about it on your number line and think about all those other things that we talked about, that the more negative it is, the smaller the number is. Positives are always bigger than negatives. And you'll do great with this.